You're listening to Superflexology, a Superflex-focused fantasy football podcast with your hosts John Bauer and Mitch Sorensen.
Thank you for joining us and welcome to episode 20 of Superflexology, a proud member of the Full-Time Fantasy Network. I'm your host, John Bauer, and you can find me on Twitter at The Bauer Club. As always, joined by Mitch Sorensen, and that's at DynoMC on Twitter. And Mitch, I was going to send some people out to look for you because you were a little quiet over the weekend. You were quiet in leagues, and I just wanted to make sure you were okay.
Dude, this time of year is so crazy. So last year, I wasn't all that active on Twitter. So this is the first year that, we've really started hitting it hard and getting our takes out there and everything. So, football started up. So we have the 32 teams that we're trying to keep track of their 75 players on each roster. Kids are starting up school, so we have the meetings with their teachers and doing the school shopping and all that fun stuff. And then on top of it, my wife planned this camping trip. So we're going to go and fish for some salmon this weekend. And so it's just trying to get everything ready at once because the kids start school next week as well. So it's been crazy. Then trying to keep up on all of the training camp news, which is impossible. Yeah, dude, it's been rough.
I actually had a family member's birthday party to go to on Sunday, but it was the perfect time, still spending time with family, but I was able to jump into an FFWC best ball draft, and that's playffwc.com. Don't just do ffwc.com because it's some type of religious website, I believe. So if you're looking to draft in a fantasy league, that's not the website for you, but it's playffwc.com. And I jumped in one of the best ball drafts, and I have found that, and I realized this kind of in the Scott Fishbowl 9 draft, and I definitely realized it here. I picked 101 in the one best ball draft I did, and I hate the way my team turned out. You're kind of stuck if you have 101, 2, 3. You have to take a running back. There's no way you're passing on McCaffrey, Kamara, Barkley, in whatever order you want. And now with Zeke at the 104, that's kind of tricky because of the whole holdout situation. But I picked 112 in a 12-team league, and I took Julio and Juju, and I posted on Twitter and somebody said that they would have gone a different route. And I said, I might do 50 of these, and in 25, I might go running back in that situation. And in 25, I might go wide receiver. But that's what I like about the back end of the draft this year. There is so much flexibility, and whatever falls to you. This situation, I took Juju and Julio. But hell, next time I might take Mixon and Dalvin Cook or Mixon and Bell, whoever's there, But there's a lot of flexibility there. So for me personally, I love the back end of the draft as opposed to 101. And so I did two. One I had 101, one I had 112. The 101, I actually took McCaffrey. And then when it came back around to me for the 4-5 turns eventually, it really got watered down. And that's kind of why I like being on the back end, because then you have the 1-2 turn, the 3-4 turn, and you kind of get a little more balance there with your first 4 picks. But that's, kind of a tangent here before we jump into the show. But just kind of my thoughts on where I'm liking, my spot to be in whether it's best ball or just a typical redraft draft this year.
So I actually had the 101 in the Scott Fishbowl. And yeah, we had this talk in the group chat earlier. And although I don't mind drafting at the 101, I hate my team in that league. So maybe I'm wrong wanting to draft at the 101. But yeah, the only redraft league that I'm in is that one. And I definitely don't like my team in it.
No, and like I said, it's just I feel like you get more balance by the 1, 2, and 3, 4 turns. And when I took Julio and Juju, I actually was able to land Devontae Freeman and Chris Carson at that 3-4 turn. But if you're at 101, you get your 3 guys, relatively early, and it's a really strong core. But then when you get to that 4-5 turn, it gets really thin really fast in a one quarterback. These are both one quarterback in a one quarterback redraft league. And I think it's one reason that I really appreciate Superflex. There's a lot more talent that gets bumped down. But speaking of Superflex, you've been telling me that and listeners, I'm telling you right now, I apologize for whatever comes out of Mitch's mouth because he just said he has a rant about Superflex. So Mitch, please take the floor.
I do. So, when we're on Twitter, we see a whole bunch of people posting, rate my team after a Superflex draft. And it's cool. I always go in there and rate them, give my thoughts on them. If you're leaving a 12-team Superflex draft with only 2 quarterbacks, you failed. There's no if, ands, or buts about it. You failed that draft. It doesn't matter what value slipped to you, and then you grab those skill position players instead of grabbing a quarterback. Because the issue is when you only have 2 quarterbacks, just based on averages, you're going to lose those 2 games when your quarterbacks have buys. You might be able to get lucky and squeak one out, but the other team starting 2 quarterbacks is going to beat you the majority of the time. There's also, if you have an injury to where either your quarterbacks are out for even 2 to a 3 game span, your season's over and you're giving yourself no room for mistakes at that point. So the, 3 to 4 extra points you're getting on a skill guy because you're skipping that 3rd quarterback, it's not going to help you out if you have any injury or bye weeks. Bye weeks come up and then you're going to lose those weeks already. Instead of if you have a 3rd quarterback, then those bye weeks aren't an automatic loss.
Now, you're talking Dynasty as well, obviously.
Dynasty, yeah, mainly Dynasty, and I think it works for redraft as well.
And we've talked about time and time again that it's the cost of acquisition in terms of quarterbacks. So if you're leaving a 12-team draft with 2 quarterbacks, like you said, you're at a disadvantage, especially in Dynasty. But I feel a little triggered, Mitch, and I'm going to tell you why. I know you've looked at my Scott Fishbowl 9 team. I have 2 quarterbacks.
You do.
I do.
Failed.
So I walked away with Kirk Cousins and Matt Ryan, who I think now I'm going to say this, and listeners, I apologize if you have Matt Ryan and I've touted him, and Mitch, you've touted him, and I actually made a wager that he wins MVP this year. That is how confident I am. I literally put my money where my mouth is, but I'm going to say this, and I'm going to shoot myself in the foot, and anybody that has Matt Ryan or Kirk Cousins, they're typically healthy quarterbacks. With that said, I'm expecting a sleeper report in about 5 minutes here that both have slipped down those stairs at home and they're out for the season. But I felt comfortable in that situation. I understand what you're saying. You need to be leaving a typical 12-team draft, especially Dynasty with 3 quarterbacks. So I can appreciate that. But again, with Scott Fishbowl 9, it was kind of a special situation. With today's news, and full disclosure to our listeners, it's Tuesday night, August 13th. We literally, and Mitch, I think you can attest to this, and the guests that we have had come on, they can too. I'm usually really prepared, and I run a tight ship when it comes to my show notes. But with that said, half an hour before we started recording, maybe 45 minutes, this whole thing with Andrew Luck came out. So it kind of threw a curveball with our show notes. And we're going to get to the players that really stood out in preseason week 1 and their dynasty value based on that, if it's impacted at all. But Mitch, the Andrew Luck news, the calf strain, in March, they did an MRI, and then the possibility that it was a bone issue because the pain spread to the front of his ankle. And now they're saying that that's not the issue. It's not a bone, and there's not going to be surgery. There's going to be rehab, which we hate that R word because we don't know how long it's going to take. And up to this point, I don't know about you, I wasn't worried about Andrew Luck for week 1 at all. I had not one worry in the world. The leagues that I had him in, he's locked and loaded. He's going to start week 1 for me. There's a lot of question marks now, right? So what are your thoughts on this? How are you adjusting in Dynasty or just overall? Do you think he plays in week 1?
I don't. As of now, I mean, like you said, it's been happening since March. If they're just getting to the bottom of it now and it's just going to be rehab, I have no faith in him playing week 1.
Do you think this is a long time? Again, for the listeners, Mitch is not a doctor, but do you think this is a long-term thing? On a scale of 1 to 10, how concerned are you personally on this?
I'm concerned at like an 8. And it's not because I'm not a doctor. I don't know. It's a huge risk to the offense is the big deal. There's some quarterbacks who leave and the skill positions will still be okay. If Luck is gone, that kills everybody's value. Hilton's going to drop. Marlon Mack's going to drop out of the top 24 running backs without a shadow of a doubt. Without Luck, the Colts are the Colts were someone who I would consider a Super Bowl contender. Without Luck, they're a contender for a top 6 to top 7 pick. Yeah,
it's alarming, and you made a good point. This really does impact the rest of that team. And if you look at the stats from 2017, now the defense has improved greatly since 2017. They were near the top in points against, or the bottom, I guess you would say. That offensive line has improved. According to Pro Football Focus, I think they're ranked 5th going into 2019. In 2017, they were near the bottom. So there are things that have changed, but they ran the ball a lot whenever Brissett was playing quarterback. And it was like 3.6 yards per carry or something like that. It wasn't good. And I had Mac, honestly, in that offense, even without the ability, but them willing to use him in the passing game. I had him as a top 12 back in 2019. And I don't know if I'm dropping him out of the top 24 because I think he might get used a little bit more if Jacoby Brissett's the quarterback, because I think he threw the ball less than 500 times in 2017. And I think they're going to use Mac a lot and rely on him, especially with that improved offensive line. But there's no way he's going to be a top 12 back. There was absolutely no way. We've talked about Eric Ebron and Jack Doyle, their value, that's going to drop in redraft specifically. T.Y. Hilton, he was really boom or bust. And full disclosure to listeners, we pre-recorded next week's episode because I'm hoping that my child will be here by then. But we pre-recorded next week's episode and we really talked about T.Y. Hilton. And we talked about how he was more consistent than one might think. Well, that is gonna be thrown out the window with Jacoby Brissett if he's in at quarterback. So he's gonna go from a highly consistent wide receiver where we don't think about that. We don't think about him in that fashion. And he goes back to more 2017 where he had less than a 60% catch rate. He had, I think it was like 55 receptions, and it's a huge negative impact on the rest of this team. So looking at it strictly from a quarterback standpoint, Mitch, and you just got through with your spiel and your anger towards the super flex drafters that only draft 2 quarterbacks. If you have Andrew Luck as he's your quarterback 1 most likely. Let's say it's a 12-team league and you only had 2 quarterbacks in this situation. Now you're down to your quarterback 2. Let's say it's a Sam Darnold, Matthew Stafford type. I don't know. What's your plan of attack here? You can't sell Andrew Luck at this point in time in Dynasty, right?
You can't. No, you take such a loss. What you have to do is you have to hope he comes back. And if it doesn't look like he's coming back, this is why you have 3 quarterbacks. And so what you'll have to do at that point is you need to just go into rebuild mode for 2020, sell veterans that aren't going to be better for your team in 2020 and try to pick up some more picks and hope Luck is better at that point. It's really all you can do because you can't sell him. Who are you going to sell him for? Phillip Rivers? I mean, I don't even think the Phillip Rivers guy would do that if Luck isn't healthy at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, it is concerning. And there's no way you're selling right now. There's absolutely no way. You're not even going to get, just because of the panic and the concern, you won't even get a 50% return. Now, obviously, if you have 3 viable options, you're still okay. You have 2 guys that you can rely on. Andrew Luck might be out. And again, in this situation, Andrew Luck is out week 1, and this kind of extends throughout the rest of the season. Are you buying?
If someone's selling, yeah, I'm more than happy to buy.
How much of a discount do you need?
It would need to be a big discount. Because in almost all my leagues, like we've said many times, I have 3 or more quarterbacks. And so if I'm pretty set with the top 2, and say I have someone like Daniel Jones, who we're going to bring up later, or actually they probably won't be trading for Daniel Jones, so that's a bad one. But say Joe Flacco, say they just want a starting quarterback. And so I would have to add to Joe Flacco. But if I did Joe Flacco and say 2021 for Andrew Luck, I'd be okay doing that even if Andrew Luck doesn't play next year.
And I think team makeup and the way people see their team is going to play a big impact. If you think you're rebuilding already, even with Andrew Luck, there's no way you're moving him. There's no reason to.
Yep.
If you think you're a win now team, I could see people selling a little bit of panic right now. But if I have him, and I do in a few leagues, I think I have 3 or 4 shares, I'm absolutely holding. You would have to take probably a 50% hit to his value. And I'm just not willing to do that. Even if, let's say he misses all of 2019. And again, we're really jumping the gun here. We're not saying he's going to, but let's say he does, just hold. I mean, and like you said, if you have some other guys and you really thought you were going to win this year, maybe you move those aging veterans, Maybe this is the time to kind of recalibrate and refuel here. But yeah, it's just, man, and it's just so crazy because you don't want to see this happen to anybody, but especially somebody the caliber of Andrew Luck. Superflex. You were spending early round draft capital on Andrew Luck, whether it's redraft, whether it's dynasty, especially dynasty. And now once you get into a 14 or 16 team league, he's a first rounder, and he should be a first rounder in a 12-team league too. I don't. Do you have any other thoughts here? It kind of threw us off a little bit. I'm going to be honest. I have these show notes set in stone, and listeners, I reach out to Mitch 50 times a day leading up to the shows, and I think there are times he wants to say, "John, shut the hell up. I got it." But I really. Like I said, I run a tight ship, but this really just threw us off, and it's such a big piece of news that we had to hit on it. I don't know. I think he very well could miss time. We've heard the Colts not lie, but kind of maybe take out details on how they really thought he was going to progress. And I think the plan right now, if I'm an Andrew Luck owner in Superflex, I'm not expecting him to start week 1. And I'm right there with you, Mitch.
Something that you can look at with this, something that just barely happened over the weekend. So we had the Antonio Brown stuff come up to where he was going to quit because he couldn't find the right helmet. And so I have a lot of Antonio Brown shares. And so over the weekend, I was being hammered with like 20 seconds. I got that in almost every single league. And I was like, no, I wouldn't trade him for 2021st. And people were like, well, that's crazy. But you just can't sell at these times. It's much better that if by a horrible circumstance, Andrew Luck is out, don't sell him as soon as you find out Andrew Luck is out. Wait a month if you have to, and then go from there and see if you want to sell him at that point. Like today we heard that Geis isn't cleared to playing games. If you went and try to trade Geis today, you wouldn't get anything for him. So you just got to hold off, bide your time, and go from there.
It's really important too. And again, man, this episode really got sidetracked. And we're still going to hit on all of the guys from preseason week 1. But I think you really have to take a look at your team. And Mitch, you said maybe wait a month. If you're 0-4 at that point, you're not going to move him. Hang on. But if you're 3-1, maybe then you can look to move him for a piece if necessary to help you make that push this year. But yeah, now's not the time to sell. You hit on Darius Geis. It's not the time to sell. Over the weekend, Antonio Brown wanted a helmet, even though there's like 30 some that are approved by the NFL. He wanted his helmet. That wasn't the time to sell. Don't panic. Don't sell. The stock obviously is going to rise again. He's going to retire next week or something. But I don't see that happening. Hold. And if you're in position to maybe make an offer for Andrew Luck, maybe venture out and make some offers. But yeah, I'm not selling Andrew Luck. So anyway, let's get to the show that we actually had planned here. We talked about Twitter and we talked about the victory laps. Week 1 of the preseason, you would have thought it was week 16 and people were in their fantasy championships and they just won. And they were like, yeah, I told you this is the guy. This is the one that's going to lead us to the promised land. So we're going to talk about some guys that had a pretty big week in the preseason and their dynasty implications. We're not talking about redraft at all from this point on the rest of the episode. So Mitch, you brought him up, Daniel Jones. And a lot of people might say that the biggest winner in week 1 of the preseason was Dave Gettleman. I mean, Daniel Jones went in there 5 for 5, 67 yards, touchdown. Dave Gettleman's a genius. We knew we should have taken him in the first round. What are your thoughts on Daniel Jones? And from a dynasty perspective, one, is his week 1 performance really doing anything for you? Or have you changed your mind? Is it reaffirming your thoughts on him? What are your thoughts here?
So I was able to pick him up a little bit in the rookie drafts just because he fell so far. You brought it up before. He's just a younger version of Eli Manning. He excels at the really short to intermediate passes, but the one thing Daniel Jones brings that Eli Manning never did is he's really athletic. Watching his tape, he actually looked good running. And that's something you always like with the young quarterbacks is for fantasy, if it's like, if nothing's there, they just take off and run and get you an extra couple points here and there. With Daniel Jones, he was hated so much. And I think that's the reason why I end up getting a lot of shares with him, because he was hated so much that his value just tanked. We get in this little bubble, and all we hear is Daniel Jones is awful. This was a horrible draft.
It was the same thing with Josh Allen last year.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that's why you're such a big fan of Josh Allen, and it's why I'm such a big fan of Daniel Jones now. I just want this kid to take off and have a great career. He looked really good in week 1, man.
Out of all the people that we're going to talk about, and all the guys that really stepped up in week 1 of the preseason, are you buying? Are you selling? Or are you are you holding? Are you going to be a rational human being and wait because it was 1 week of the preseason?
Yeah, I'm just going to hold off on Daniel Jones because I think a lot of people still don't want to pay what I think he's worth in Superflex leagues. I'm not going to buy him because I would want to pay that much, and I just don't want to pay that much for him either at the time, if that makes sense. You know, I want to sell him for that amount, but I definitely don't want to buy him for that amount either.
Right. And one example for the listener. So I blasted out offers, not so much in 12-team leagues, but I tested the waters in 14 or 16-team leagues. And of course, it's really hard, and this comes up all the time, that you make an offer, it's rejected, and you try to get some dialogue going, and you're like, all right, well, do you have a counter, or what else would you need? And one of our league mates, which he's not wrong because it was a 14-team league, I need a quarterback back. And I could not offer that. I didn't want to offer that. So I threw out 2 2020 seconds for Daniel Jones in a 14-team Superflex. That was rejected. I offered you Curtis Samuel to start. That was rejected. And that was a 14-team league. I even threw in Naheem Hines. And you still scoffed at my offer, Mitch. Just take the offer. But you scoffed at that one, too. And again, it's tough in a 14 or 16-team league to buy a quarterback without giving one up. But now I think I am going to test the waters in 12-team leagues. If I don't think I would be able to get him for 1 2020 second, and I don't think I'm going to be able to get him for 2. And it's tough because if I'm set at the quarterback position, or I have 3 guys that I can rely on, like we've talked about, in a 12-team league, you should have 3 in a 12-team Superflex. I don't think I'm willing to part with a 2020 first just yet, just with the expected strength of that class. But maybe this is a situation where we want to buy high now because we think that stock's going to rise. And we have seen this so many times. We even saw it with Baker Mayfield last year. I don't know if you remember, Mitch.
I do.
He was behind Tyrod Taylor, and his value was nowhere near where it should have been because he wasn't starting. And people look at these bench quarterbacks, even though we know he's going to get an opportunity. We know Daniel Jones is going to get an opportunity. And I'm by no means saying that Daniel Jones is Baker Mayfield. But last year, Baker's value was it dropped a few notches because he wasn't starting right away. What happened whenever he started? He didn't even do anything yet, and his value skyrocketed. And I don't think Daniel Jones is going to get to that point, but I can guarantee once he's named the starter, that value is going to increase. So if you believe in Daniel Jones, which I do, Mitch, you do, I don't think he's going to be an absolute trailblazer out there. He's not going to light up the scoreboard, but he's strong in that short to intermediate range. And I think I'm okay paying above market value right now. But again, 12-team league, I'm not moving a 2020 first, I don't think. And I would offer 2 2020 seconds, but I don't think the owner is going to accept. And Mitch, you told me, you messaged me earlier, you said, you can't buy Daniel Jones right now. This is the worst time to buy him. And I think you're right on that. It's kind of like worst time to sell Andrew Luck, worst time to buy Daniel Jones because of that one good drive.
Yeah, I disagree with you a little bit. I think if I have a contending team, and I'm pretty sure that I'm going to be making playoffs this year, barring injuries and whatnot, I'd be willing to give a 2020 first for Daniel Jones. Mainly because I know everybody loves the quarterback class next year, but I personally am not a huge fan of it. Tua is awesome, and I'm really high on Jordan Love, but I don't like Fromm, and I don't like Justin Herbert. So I think Tua's going to go in the top 3 next year in every single rookie draft, so you're not going to get him anyways.
Yep.
So you can look at it. Daniel Jones is going to be the starting quarterback for a team with Saquon Barkley next year. That, that's a pretty good selling point for me. And if I could buy him for a late 2020 first right now, and maybe I need him late in the season because I have a quarterback injury, I would rather buy him now than when he ends up becoming the starter. Although I do think Eli's going to have to be really, really, really bad before the Giants give Daniel Jones any chance at that starting job.
I agree with that. And I think a lot of people, especially that we're in leagues with, there's a lot of smart people in the leagues we're in, a lot of smart owners. And they know that Daniel Jones' value is going to rise when he's a starter. Exactly what we said. It's going to rise. And they're not selling him right now. And I've run into that. I ran into that in one of our leagues tonight. And that's the response I got. And I didn't like it because I wanted to get Daniel Jones at a relatively cheap price right now. But I absolutely agree. You can't sell Daniel Jones right now. A month ago, 2 weeks ago, a week ago, right before the preseason game, people, I got him for Curtis Samuel straight up in a 14-team Superflex. And at the time, I needed a sanity check from you. I messaged you. I said, I think I'm going to accept this. And you said something along the lines like, you should have hit accept already.
Yeah, you should have smashed it, dude.
And I made the trade. I brought Daniel Jones over to the good guys team here. Yeah, I just, there's something about him. And I think it's kind of that underdog story. People hate him so much. And he's your 2019 Josh Allen. And I'm going to jump on that train with you. I think you still should be making moves to get him relatively cheap while he's not starting. I didn't think we'd be spending anytime, again, if you told me a week ago, you guys are going to be spending 10 minutes to talk about Daniel Jones, I would say, you're crazy. But this next guy, this is a guy that has caused you and I a little bit of a headache in terms of early victory laps. So Darwin Thompson, I'm not going to lie, he looked good. He looked good with the opportunity he had in that first week. How worried are you about Damian Williams? And you can be honest here. It's the circle of trust here. You can let out the feelings, Mitch.
2 weeks ago, I started getting a little bit worried about Damian Williams because he was injured. He wasn't starting. And if you watch all the reports coming across Twitter, like, it wasn't looking good. You heard Andy Reid come out and said it's a running back by committee. And then we saw Carlos Hyde get the first touches in the preseason game, and then Darwin Thompson came in. He was really good, like you said. But the biggest reason why I'm not worried about him overtaking the starting job is he's 5'8", 200 pounds. I mean, 200 pounds is probably giving him an extra 5 to 10 pounds as well. He's just not that big of a guy who's going to be, the starting running back. But I do think he's going to come in. I do think he's going to get work. What I've been watching for the last week or so, I've been watching all the local Kansas City beat writers, and none of them are saying anything besides Damian Williams is the number one. But a lot of them now are saying Carlos Hyde might not make the team. And it's going to be pretty much Damian Williams, Darwin Thompson, Darrell Williams. And I think that's might be how it goes, which sucks for me because I have a lot of Carlos Hyde shares too. But if you look at how the Chiefs are building their team, they want it really fast. And all three of those guys fit that bill. Carlos Hyde does not fit that bill at all. And I think we could easily see in 3 weeks, Darwin Thompson is the guy coming in immediately after Damian Williams.
We said this, and I knew we talked about it, and I had to go back and listen. We brought Darwin Thompson up on our third episode. This was our post-draft hype special. And the big thing that we talked about, if listeners, if you want to go back and listen, it's right around that 45-minute mark. We said that we could see Darwin Thompson having a role on this team, but the guy that he was going to replace and cause a headache for was Carlos Hyde. The way Darwin Thompson was profiled, he was a grinder in between the tackles, athletic, and he could catch out of the backfield. That is exactly what we saw in week 1 of the preseason. There was one play right up the gut. I think it was to the right side of the line, but still behind the tackle. He dragged and bowled through like 3 or 4 guys, a lot of strength, a really compact, not a big guy like you mentioned, but a lot of strength. And he exactly as it profiled, a grinder in between the tackles. We saw the athleticism. He hurdled over a defender. And we saw the ability to catch the ball. He had the 29-yard touchdown reception against, I think, a third-string linebacker maybe. So, I'm taking it with a grain of salt, but we talked about it 2 months ago. We said, or 3 months ago now, we said Darwin Thompson was going to be an issue for Carlos Hyde. And I still absolutely feel that way, even if it's a running back by committee. And I tweeted this out of last week. The last 5 games that Damian Williams started, he either carried the ball or he was on the receiving end of a target 80% of the time. Out of all the guys in the backfield, 80% of the opportunities went to Damian Williams. And let's say that gets cut to 60% or 50%. He still would have been a back-end running back 1 if we extrapolate that out over the course of a season, which is dangerous to do, I know. But I still like him at his current price. And based on news that we saw today, they interviewed the running back coach, and they said Damian Williams is going to be the first guy on the field for us. And the other guys are going to fill in. They're still going to contribute. But I think Damian Williams still the running back 1 in that offense. But I think Darwin Thompson is definitely going to have a role. And this may be one of the first times that we see Andy Reid's offense produce 2 fantasy relevant running backs. I like what I saw to Darwin Thompson. So I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, Damian Williams, he's the only one. It's like Highlander. There can only be one Highlander. I think Darwin Thompson, I think he can step up and I think he can contribute. Mitch, in Dynasty, are you buying, selling? What are you doing?
I would buy him if I can. I worry the price is going to be too high. I would look to trade maybe someone like Benny Snell and maybe a 2024, maybe Benny Snell and a 2025 third if I really wanted Darwin.
You're not getting him for that price.
I know, but that's the problem, right? I'm not willing to pay a 2022nd for him.
Right.
And so it's kind of that in between of you're going to have to give up a player, but it's kind of hard to pick it out because it's probably just going to need to be someone that other owner wants. So you might have to give up someone like Curtis Samuel for Darwin Thompson plus Valdes Scantling, something like that in order for it to work.
Right. He's probably going to have to be a smaller piece in the deal. I agree with that. And we talk about this with Dynasty all the time. Right now, all of these guys we're talking about, because their value has been inflated, whether it's actual value or perceived, and sometimes those don't line up, their buy and sell values are going to be completely different. And I don't think we're going to see a lot of trades just involving those players. They're probably going to have to be throw-ins to a bigger deal. I have 7 shares of Darwin Thompson. I'm not going to move him. I'm not going to acquire more. I think he's the perfect example of a hold for me. So, but again, Carlos Hyde needs to be worried. And at practice today, he was running with the 2s. I don't think he ran with the 1s at all, as reported. So that has to be a little worrisome for Carlos Hyde. So, yeah, I mean, all these guys, if you can get them at a reasonable price, sure. And I think that's kind of going to be the story of the rest of the episode. Buy them if you can, but don't overpay because of what we saw basically in one series from the first preseason game. Next up, we have a wide receiver we want to talk about, Mitch. And this is a guy, undrafted free agent, but it wasn't necessarily because of talent. Off the field issues for Preston Williams really created problems for him. A lot of people, and there was an anonymous GM quote with his NFL draft profile that said he's a character scratch for many teams. They weren't even looking at him because of what he did. He was arrested in 2017 for a domestic dispute or whatever the situation was, or however you want to word it. But he was arrested in 2017. So now with everything going on in the NFL and all these other guys that they can't seem to get their head on straight, a lot of teams just didn't even want to look at him. So Preston Williams, huge first preseason game, 4 catches, 97 yards. Are you looking at him any differently than you were before from an on-the-field perspective?
Definitely. So he was someone who some of our league mates have talked about a little bit, and I didn't really, put too much weight into it. But watching him play, he looked really good. He had, the 4 catches for 97 yards. I think he also drew 2 pass interference penalties. So this is what Brian Flores, the head coach, but, he comes from a defensive background. And this is what he has to say, and I really, really like this. So it's kind of a long quote, but he said, I think he's worked extremely hard since he got here. He's big, he's fast, he's got good hands, he's tough, and he's really worked every day to get better. We tell him to block, he blocks. Play more downhill on your end cuts, he does that. He works hard after practice, he works hard in meetings, and it showed up tonight. And having a coach say that about an undrafted wide receiver, about how hard he's working and how the coach appreciates that, I think he's a lock for the roster now, where if you asked me a month ago, I'm like, well, maybe he could be a training camp guy. But now I think he's going to be a lock for the roster.
And one reason, we mentioned the character issues and what happened in 2017. He had a terrible pro day. And Mitch, you and I talked, and I don't know the answer to this, but if you look at playerprofiler.com and they have the metrics, I don't know if they're from the pro day or if was he at the combine? I honestly don't know. He
wasn't invited to the combine. No, he was invited.
He wasn't?
No, because if they have an assault charge or anything like that, they're not invited to the combine anymore.
There you go. So he wasn't at the combine. So this had to be from his pro day. He didn't have a good pro day. And the metrics, they show that 14th percentile in his 14th 9.92 catch radius. That's 35th percent. Those are not good numbers, especially for a big body receiver, 6'4". You're telling me your catch radius is 35th percentile? Come on. Maybe it was just a really bad day for him. I don't know. The one thing that I like with him, the opportunity. It's a wide open depth chart. He's a big body receiver, 6'4". You have a 6'3" Devontae Parker, 6'3" Allen Hurns, and then you have Kenny Stills, Albert Wilson, Jakeem Grant. I didn't know this, Mitch. Grant is like 5'6" or something.
Oh, he's a tiny dude.
I was like, jeez. And it's funny because you look at the heights and you think, okay, they gave him an inch or two. Did they give him an inch or two? I don't know.
Yeah, you bring up the height. So Preston Williams is 2 inches taller than any other wide receiver that they have. And I think he has a good chance of taking over Parker's job, dude. Parker doesn't have his job set in stone at all.
All right, so what are you willing to buy? What are you willing to pay to acquire Preston Williams?
So I paid a 2020 second. It was a larger league, so it was a 16-team league. But I'd be willing to pay a second in any league that's bigger than 12. In a 12-teamer, I would try a third, and I would consider a late second if I thought I really needed him for depth for the wide receivers.
Everybody talks about it. They say these are the guys that I don't have any shares of, and if I miss on them, I'm okay with it. This is one of those guys for me. I'm not going to pay the inflated price. If you would have told me a week ago that you paid a 2020 second for Preston Williams, I was worried that you disappeared and you fell off the face of the earth because you were so quiet over the weekend. I would have thought somebody stole your phone and made that trade because a 2020 second, I still don't know if I'm paying. I'm not going to pay that. And if it's a guy I miss on, it's a guy I miss on. But for me personally, I'm just avoiding. Again, I just can't pay that inflated price. Moving on here, David Montgomery. Not great metrics. 4.63 40, 38th percentile. Vacated carries. Jordan Howard's gone. We think David Montgomery is going to fill that role. He's going to have such a large workload. A lot of people make the comparison Montgomery to Hunt, whether it's for convenience or people really believe that. You know, the Matt Nagy ties. Really strong performance in week 1 of the preseason. 3 carries, 16 yards, a touchdown. But I think what surprised people, 3 receptions for 30 yards. That's a pretty good showing there. Now, Tariq Cohen, is he going to steal some of those receptions? Sure. I think his upside in that regard is capped. His draft capital in startups right now, it's already pretty significant. I think this is going to bump it up even more. Are you buying or selling this bump in perceived value on David Montgomery, Mitch?
I'm not buying him just because Tariq Cohen is still there and he's going to get the passing work. And I really don't go out and buy running backs who only get the rushing yards and you can't really count on them for the receiving at all. But if you do want to sell them in your leagues, just go and get how do you say it, GIF? It's still GIF, but I'll say GIF.
I say GIF. Thank you. Just please for me.
So we'll go GIF, but just post that of his touchdown run and that cut that he made. That cut that he made was unreal. And that works against first string defense or practice squad guys. So he would have scored a touchdown against anybody. The good thing about him is if you want to sell him, I would sell him soon. Because although the price is going up, his perceived value is really high to buyers right now. And I think you could get, if you were to offer someone David Montgomery for Devontae Freeman, I think the Freeman guy would accept it pretty quick.
Absolutely.
See, I personally wouldn't do it. I would rather have Freeman because he's going to be locked into that number 1 role. And I think he's going to be awesome this year. But I think most guys would do it.
A lot of the places that I have Devontae Freeman, it's probably a more win now team. So I'm going to hang on to him there. But I think a lot of people would pull the trigger there. I actually offered a 2020 first and a 2021 second, and it was quickly rejected in a 12-team league.
That's amazing.
I was willing to pay the piper, and if they reject that, there's nothing you can do. I made the attempt. I thought it was a clear overpay. If you stack David Montgomery up against the guys that are coming out next year, and a lot of the guys that we talked to, the Devy experts out there, I think they would have quickly accepted that. There's one league, Mitch, you and I, we co-own a team. We are in dire need of a wide receiver. We have a couple guys that could be low-end wide receiver 2s, but I would love to add somebody that has that wide receiver 1 potential. I kind of make some trade offers without you knowing, I think, at times.
You make a lot of trade offers in that, but no one answers them, so it's okay.
No, it sat for 5 days. Now, this was prior to that week 1 output that we saw from David Montgomery, but straight up David Montgomery for T.Y. Hilton, straight up David Montgomery for Kenny Golladay, both sat for 5 days, no response. I revoked them because I get impatient. And league mates, they know this. I typically don't even let an offer sit for a full day. So to let it sit for 5 days really ate away at me. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Mitch. I'm trying to sell him, but it's something that's going to have to help my team. But like I said, in that one situation, I was trying to buy him. I have a 2020 first. Those things burn a hole in my pocket. It's like when you're a little kid and you get your allowance. And some people, they save their money. I was always the kid that I would go out and buy Pokemon cards. I would have my mom take me to the store for Pokemon cards, or I had to get a wrestling action figure, whatever it was. If I had money in my pocket, I had to spend it. And I'm still kind of that way today, which, with a kid on the way, that's always really good. He's a tough one. And like I said, a lot of these guys, their sell versus buy values are really far off. Again, we kind of went all over the place with David Montgomery, but Mitch, he's a sell for you, correct?
Yeah, he's a sell for me right now.
And I would say 90% of the leagues I'm in, he's a sell for me. But in that one league in particular, I wanted a running back, and that was one guy that I wanted to target because I know the owner of the David Montgomery, he said he was, let me add some context. He said he was looking for future picks. So that was one of the reasons. That was the running back on his team that I wanted. So that's why I made the offer. And it didn't really pan out. Now we have one more guy we want to talk about. And this is a guy that I'm really vocal on. And I'm screaming from the mountaintops. But Mitch, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm going to let you ease the listeners into this one. James Washington, a huge week one.
Huge week one. He also had a huge preseason game last year as well. Wasn't it week 2? That's kind of the thing with him is, so we've seen it before. And it didn't really pan out. And looking at him on the field last year, he didn't look very good. I mean, I hate to be the bearer of bad news to Steelers fans, but he didn't look very good last year. And he came out and he had a really great game against Tampa. But everybody has a good game against Tampa. That's something we're going to hit on over and over and over again in DFS this year. Man, I don't even know what I would want to buy him for, because I don't think he's going to be... He might be the third wide receiver on that team, but I don't know, man. What do you think about him?
I wouldn't pay a 2020 second. I would sell him for a 2020 second, whether it's 12, 14, 16 team league. I don't have any shares though. Out of all the leagues I have, and that has to be very telling for people how I really feel about James Washington. I live in Pittsburgh. I'm a Steelers fan. I hate James Washington. When we made that draft pick, I was so excited. We're going to pair him with Mason Rudolph. We're going to have that connection for years to come. And maybe it will come to fruition. Maybe it will. But it's not this year. Do not go out and buy James Washington based on that performance. We've seen this movie before, and it was great last year. Mitch, you brought it up. Week 2 against the Packers, 5 catches, 114 yards, 2 touchdowns. Absolute stud. Guess what? He did it again this year. Week 1, 4 catches, 84 yards, touchdown. No Juju. No Dante Moncrief. No Vance McDonald. No James Conner. Limited action for Jalen Samuels. People want to point to the breakout age. So people, 98th percentile, 18.4 years old. Absolutely mind-boggling. How's it going to translate here in the NFL, especially when you're somewhat buried and a lot of people think he's going to take that number 2 role off of Dante Moncrief? No. Again, if I were a betting man, which I absolutely am, I would bet that James Washington is not the number 2 receiver, whether it's in 2 wide receiver sets or I don't know, or even with wide receiver production. It's not going to be James Washington. Last year, 16 catches on 38 targets. 42.1% catch rate. I'm getting all worked up over here, Mitch. I can't even say my words here. 42.1% catch rate. I went back. I wanted to look at historical Pittsburgh numbers for wide receivers. That was the lowest catch rate since the year 2000 for a Pittsburgh wide receiver with at least 38 targets. Almost 2 full decades. And people still want to tout this guy as if he's going to break out this year. And then I know, John, you're saying Dante Moncrief is going to break out in his 6th year. Yeah, you know what? I am. It's a different situation. I am saying he's going to break out this year. I think he has that role locked, the wide receiver 2 role locked. I don't think it's going to be James Washington. I don't know. I can't make myself more clear than I am. I think at this point I'm screaming into my microphone. So listeners, I apologize. Maybe you had to turn this down a little bit, but don't buy him. Do not buy him. Don't buy James Washington. Do you have anything else to add about James Washington?
So I honestly thought I didn't have any shares either. And I pulled it up, and I guess I have 1 share somewhere. But I'm usually pretty locked in with my rosters. But immediately after this, I'm going to go and I'm going to try to trade him. I'm going to find whatever league he's in, and I'm going to go offer him for a 2020 second to everyone in the league. And I'll let you know if it gets accepted.
Now, if I thought that his value was going to rise, if I thought that he was going to put up big numbers, maybe week 1 of the regular season, I would say hold. But I just don't see it happening. I don't see him really being a producer this year. Now, if you have him, sell him. But if you like him, I think you're going to be you're going to be able to buy him back cheaper during the season. And that's one of the reasons I'm saying sell him. If I thought that he was going to increase in value, hold, but I just don't see it happening. And at least not in 2019. So that's my spiel for James Washington. If you have him, sell him. So we hit on some quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and believing in preseason hype can be a dangerous game. It really can, but we all do it. It can also help you, though, and you can gain a massive advantage over league mates in dynasty leagues. All we're saying is be very careful over the next few weeks and don't believe every single fluff piece or buy into one good preseason game when making a trade. Just be very careful when it comes to that. As always, thank you so much for listening. I'm John Bauer. You can find me on Twitter at The Bauer Club. For Mitch Sorensen at DynoMC. And please follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Superflexology. Have a great night.
Thank you for listening to the Superflexology podcast. If you want the latest news in fantasy football, follow us on Twitter at Superflexology, The Bauer Club, and DynoMC.